Thank you for joining us today for the latest edition of Supply Chain Horizons. I'm Karin Bursa, Vice President with Logility, and I'm very excited today to dig into this area of transportation, planning and optimization, and really the contributions that it makes to give us better insight in understanding our cost to serve. Reducing freight costs continues to be one of the primary motivations for investing in transportation management systems. However, securing capacity, improving overall freight efficiency are becoming equally strong motivations. Today, transportation management suites have been extended. They include things like multiple modes of transportation, looking at both strategic planning, strategic sourcing, and procurement right down through to freight accounting and auditing capabilities. And as supply chains become increasingly global, transportation solutions have to extend to include these global logistics capabilities. All these together need to be considered as important factors in better understanding your cost to serve your customers. Thinking both strategically and leveraging tactical opportunities are getting increasingly challenging. With us today to discuss 5 keys to transportation success is Bob Heaney. Bob is a highly regarded research director with the Aberdeen Group. And Bob brings more than 25 years of supply chain practitioner experience. Bob, thank you so much. And maybe you could start off by just telling us, what do you see as the latest business challenges that are driving initiatives in this area of transportation and understanding cost to serve?
Well, that's excellent, Karin. Certainly we are challenged today in the transportation area, particularly when you put it into the context of today's global supply chain and global economy. We've listed several things in our recent report on this topic at Aberdeen, and we've got 4 here that I'd like to hit at a very high level. Cost control being number 1. When we think about today's global supply chain, certainly we are challenged with really segmenting our costs, and transportation is the largest cost when we look at total landed cost. Of course, that's including inbound and outbound transportation, and sometimes the inbound side is overlooked. But when you bundle inbound and outbound costs together, cost control rises to the surface as a major challenge for companies, because it's very important to compete and reduce costs at the same time improving service levels. Jumping down to omni-channel. Service levels today are more challenged because of omni-channel. In today's environment, as we look at the logistics flows, whether you're a retailer, manufacturer, supplier, or wholesaler, in many cases you're delivering straight to the residential home. And this requires a lot more granular look at your transportation flows. And to compete in that omni-channel market, in some markets it's same-day or next-day delivery, as Amazon, Walmart, and others are launching their new capabilities into the marketplace. Omni-channel raises its head as a new type of service, and these new flows and their costs need to be kind of molded into your overall strategy. And multi-department and multi-enterprise requirements is another area. And I think that's pretty obvious. The whole idea of internal collaboration as well as external across the enterprise, from inbound to outbound, from your carriers, your 3PLs, to the customers themselves. There's just a lot more collaboration across these different groups. And then utilizing data to improve operations. It's one thing to have an idea of the events, as items move from overseas onto the ocean and then move from ocean to fleet, maybe to parcel and flow through your distribution points. It's important to have visibility to the events and to manage those events, but also those costs. And many times it's someone else controlling the cost. So you have to be proactive in planning, and you need to really, if you're going to be best in class, drive some flexibility. So those, again, are the 4 key challenges that we see.
Yeah, our expectation as consumers has changed significantly in the last 5 years, and we need to apply that same kind of thinking in the business-to-business environment as well. As businesses that supply the marketplace, we need that ability to be more responsive, but we've got to be able to plan strategically in order to be cost efficient. So when you put all this together, Bob, what are some of these key capabilities in the transportation sector that companies should consider today?
Definitely, there's a lot of information around this. On the left, we've got what were the specific key metrics that distinguish the leaders from the followers, the best in class, those that are more automated in their transportation solutions, and the followers, those that are less automated. And as we cut it that way, we see that there's a correlation between the degree of automation and the excellence that a company exhibits when it comes to complete and on-time deliveries, orders, as well as decreases in landed costs per unit shipped and in the frequency of out-of-stocks. That gap can be fairly significant where the leaders have advantage in their capabilities over the followers. That first item there, they're 1.93 times as likely to have the ability to segment supply chain based on customer profile data. Cost to serve modeling at the item, product, and customer level, they are 3.5 times as likely to do that. Only 35% of the best-in-class really are able today to take that customer segmented data that 77% of the best-in-class say they have ability to segment it and really turn it into a cost to serve at the product, customer, and item level. So even the leaders are lagging in as far as where they want to be in this process. Things such as rate, trade, transport, and rate analysis. Again, 4.7 times as likely if you're a leader to be able to do that. And that's critical. Transport costs being the single largest cost in total cost to serve. It's important that you have the ability to both measure the rates and be able to analyze those rates against your competition and against other lanes and modes of transport, as well as by customer and by segment. So these are just some of the things where we see, some gaps in performance that then correlate to those advantages on the metrics that the leaders demonstrate.
When you look at this, best in class have a clear advantage. What does that look like from a practical sense?
First of all, I think to compete in today's global marketplace, you need to be serving the customer through the omni-channel, through the logistics channel of preference. I mean, you can no longer rely on, shipping truckload quantities from your manufacturing site into a retailer's DC or into a wholesaler and expecting all the parcel level deliveries to be handled by someone else. In today's world, you've got to be collaborative. You have to be willing to, as a Samsung or as a Dell, to ship straight to the residential home if that's a preference that the brand holder is requiring from you. And so you can lose business and you can lose market share and essentially not be able to compete if you don't offer what's needed and at a cost and at a service level that, is competitive given all of the superior performance that we're seeing by some of the top leaders here. So these capabilities are not just nice to haves, they become root requirements to run your business. And then second, even the best in class are attempting to do item, product, and customer level cost to serve modeling, but that's a very deep dive and requires a lot of integration and synchronization of data and costs across a broad spectrum of partners, internal and external to the enterprise. And then on top of that, optimization tools. So it's one thing to have these as goals, and the best in class are, starting to deliver on it, but they all have a long way to go in implementing this more segmented look at the supply chain.
So, Bob, I know that in your research you're indicating that the best in class are more likely to automate the supplier or the inbound carrier information exchange. Why is this inbound area left as an afterthought for so many businesses? What makes it so challenging?
Well, a lot of times it's not even a cost that is broken out. If you think about the more traditional way of costing goods, many times transportation cost is bundled into the purchase price of either the component or even the finished goods in some cases. So that the cost of transportation from the final assembly point or from the manufacturing point to the next stage in the chain is often buried in the product price and not even split out. That's called prepaid. Collect, oftentimes it's buried there, but on collect you get a rebate or a freight allowance for the freight component that so you basically pay for it and you know in advance what it's going to be, even though it's buried into the cost of goods. You get an allowance back for handling the freight instead of letting the supplier handle the freight. So that the first challenge is that those costs aren't often in your radar as far as even visible to you because they're buried in the cost of goods. They're not articulated. They may not be under your control. More and more companies are taking control of that, taking over the freight and using their own fleets in order to optimize that inbound freight. As I pick up something or drop something off at my store, if that happens to be in downtown LA and I've got a supplier down there, I may swing by after I drop off my items to the store, pick up the TVs that are going to my distribution center and drop them back off. So I'm connecting inbound and outbound, leveraging my own economies of scale and my own fleet. And now I'm taking control of inbound, where in the past I let that fall on the shoulders of my supplier. So the biggest challenge is, one, gaining visibility and control of those costs, and then coordinating and really leveraging, streamlining your operations to take advantage of economies of scale.
You're saying that best-in-class is much more likely to be tapping into the optimization tools. Where do you see those benefits playing out more often for the best-in-class?
Certainly, it's the idea of being able to collect this very granular shipment by shipment, item by item level of visibility to both the shipment events and as well as their costs, and then being able to proactively, and while items are even in flight, leverage optimization tools to take advantage of opportunities. So one of the first items up here, the spot bid capability. Best in class 1.59 times as likely to automate that. Spot bid capability would say, I have something that I need to ship. I now use automation tools to, almost like eBay, place a load for bid out there and or respond to somebody's request for moving my load. And so there's this exchange that's electronic and automated. So I'm taking advantage of price breaks and leveraging the capabilities of suppliers and carriers that I typically don't work with through having an automation platform to facilitate it. Another one is dynamic hub optimization, 1.14 times as likely. This is the idea that, let's say an ocean container comes in at the port, it's got multiple products on it, but it's holiday season and some of those items need to go straight to the customer. I can pull that container off to a 3PL, direct some of that product to flow direct to the consumer, label, price it, move it. But I can't do that without an optimization tool. One, I have to know that it hit the port. Two, I have to know what's in it. I need to know what my costs are. And three, I have to have a capability to collaborate with someone at the port to move those goods on my behalf, maybe to a store rooftop or maybe to a end consumer. And that's dynamic hub optimization. So these capabilities certainly require real-time control, also that visibility that we talked about before.
Take us through, Bob, the 5 keys that you see for transportation success.
So again, as we think about these challenges of really controlling and managing cost and service in the transportation area, there were 5 key areas: contract and rates management. If you think about the process, once I've identified my sourcing opportunities and my flows that I anticipate within my transportation network, end-to-end, inbound and outbound, now I need to structure and work with my partners to establish what the contractual rates are going to be, the volumes, and to not only measure then and build a plan based on those rates, but to measure actuals as I proceed through it. One of the items on the chart that we saw earlier was being able to capture those costs as items are in flight and as they move through the inbound-outbound supply chain, and make sure that they're compliant with the contract and rates. So this is not just a planning process, and it leads to systemic change within the supply chain. The second, routing and service level agreement compliance. So again, once you have the contracts and rates, those are dependent on a correlated set of volumes by lane and mode. And if your carriers cannot, support those capacity requirements to move X amount from point A to point B, that doesn't really matter whether you have a good rate on that. If you can't also fulfill that level of service level agreement on that at that rate level, you're also going to not be able to serve the marketplace at the cost that you want. You may have to find an alternate carrier, etc. So this is another component of that process of planning, but it ripples into execution as well. But then as you start looking at your overall network, periodically you should be assessing capabilities to do mode shift, rate and lane aggregation, and consolidation. This is probably where the single biggest area of opportunity for companies is today in the transportation area, is as their supply chains are very dynamic, ebbs and flows from sourcing that changes, as well as the flow outbound, how much now am I moving through e-commerce platforms direct to the consumer, as I'm dealing with omni-channel and all these multiple lanes. There are shifts happening, and I need to take advantage of the opportunities to aggregate, consolidate, and maybe eliminate some of my smaller suppliers in favor of more volume with one at a substantial discount or service level improvement. Then rate and route and stop optimization on multi-stop trucks. If you think about what's happening today, this whole idea, we talked a little bit about Walmart coordinating both inbound and outbound. If I've got Walmart trucks going to a cluster of stores in the Chicago area, and on the way back I want to pick up loads from my vendors in the Chicago area and bring them back to my DCs, I've got a much more complex routing and stop optimization opportunity than if I'm just doing simple one-way, coming back deadhead or empty. So these continuous moves, as they're called, require very sophisticated TMS systems to do this route and stop optimization. And they're now linked into, like Google Maps and GPS systems and fuel gauge systems, labor tracking, driver tracking systems as well. So it becomes even more, technologically sophisticated to really do this in today's environment. And then finally, settlements and financial payment. You really can't know how well you've done against that contract rate or how compliant you are by mode, route. And so it's very important to take a look at how your actuals are coming in, how the carriers are performing, and be able to do freight audit and pay operations that support your overall business.
Bob, it amazes me that when we at Logility are working with customers in this marketplace, I'm shocked by how many are still managing their transportation operations in Excel spreadsheets. When so much optimization and automation are available to them, TMS really can drive performance for them. I mean, not just the cost reduction, but boosting service at the same time and getting better utilization out of the partners that you're dedicating your business to. I mean, when a company goes from spreadsheets or semi-automated transportation operations to a fully automated solution, it really changes the business. And those benefits go straight to the bottom line. I mean, you've already sold the product. You're servicing the customer. You've done the hard work of developing the product and differentiating it. Now you need to really manage that delivery service in a way that differentiates your service capability, but also keeps that cost basis in line.
Right. TMS Drives Performance. You've hit on all of them. Really, through automation, you're going to be able to handle the big data that's required here. Think about all the shipments, customers, items, and products that are flowing day in and day out across the course of a year for, today's typical company. And how do you optimize both events and costs, load building, mode and carrier selection, freight audit and payment calculations. You can't do that without automation. You really can't do it on a spreadsheet. And even if you have visibility to the events, you need to have optimization tools in place that really understand the interconnection of those costs and how they ebb and flow with the other costs in your supply chain, like fulfillment, particularly as you flow to the omni-channel customer. So improving operational performance, we list a couple of things there. Improving customer service. And this is customers service not just to the B2B customer, but your growing B2C segment for many of these companies, straight to the home and in parcel and other modes of transport that typically were not high volume and now are becoming. And then lastly, you can't get away from continuing to measure your capabilities over time. Today's supply chain, particularly the transportation components of it, are very dynamic. And without having some continuous measurement capabilities in place, you're not really going to be taking advantage of capabilities as they evolve and change with the supply chain needs.
Bob Heaney with Aberdeen Group. Bob, thanks so much for your time today.
Thank you as well. I appreciate doing it.